Hello and welcome. Today we are going to discuss how to understand your DNA testing, and really how to upgrade your genes. Interesting subject because we all have genes and we all have genetic tendencies. And by now, if you're a patient of mine, you should understand and have a really good grasp on the fact that the DNA is not your destiny. It's really at your fingertips and what you can do to reduce a lot of the risk for disease that may be hereditary. So we're just going to jump right into this, and I'm going to share my screen so that you could see the actual PowerPoint that we're going to use. And so let's just hop right in there so that you could see the PowerPoint that I want to share with you today. And as I said, we're going to discover how to upgrade your genes, decrease your risks of disease, and actually improve your entire life. So the first question is, what is your genetic risk? We all have a genetic risk for celiac disease, maybe lactose or gluten intolerance, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Cancer could run in your family, heart disease, fibromyalgia, joint muscle pain, depression and anxiety, obesity, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, sleep disorders. There's a wide range of disease risks that we find ourselves in. And again, once you know where your genetic strengths and weaknesses are, you can put your focus on how to downregulate those genes. What is your genome? Well, people have 46 chromosomes, 23 from each parent. The entire set of genetic instructions each of us carries is called your genome. And so this genome determines not only what life you're going to live now, but also what you're going to transfer onto future generations. The human genome contains only 21 to 23,000 genes, which is about the same as other animals and insects, and less than many plants. However, there's 3 billion genetic building blocks, or base pairs, that make us who we are, providing the master instructions to build, repair, and maintain all body functions and behaviors. So it's all of the hereditary material that these genes are really that you possess that gives your body instructions for building, operating, and maintaining all life functions. Your genetic code is basically the genes that are expressed that determine your future, your health tendencies, your disease susceptibility, and basically whether you're going to thrive or struggle with your health. When they talk about genetic defects, a good example would be breast cancer, for example. BRCA1 and BRCA2 are the two suppressor genes that are found in all people. And if there's a defect or a mutation in one of these genes or both of these genes, it really increases the likelihood of breast cancer. Since then, it's become known that there's 11 major gene mutations, including BRCA1 and BRCA2, that can cause breast cancer, while 25 or 30 other genetic variants are also linked to this disease. So the challenges that we have as far as genes like this being linked to disease is, number one, it's well known now that there are at least 11 major gene mutations, and there's 25 or 30 other genetic variants that are also linked to the disease. So it's really hard to peg. Number two, only a fraction of the people with these genes ends up with the disease. Number three, only a small fraction of the total people with the condition have the gene mutation. So remember, there's 3 billion genetic building blocks or base pairs, creating intense complexity that would make it very difficult for life to simply be determined by one or a handful of genes. So as we always say, your genes are not your destiny. You can't just say, well, if cancer runs in my family, well, there's a very high likelihood I'm going to have it. So the truth is that random mutations just don't simply explain disease. Less than 2 to 5% of all disease falls into this gene-caused category. It's knowing your genes and what you do with them that matters most. So it was published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, a quote by one of the scientists that said, the risk of focusing on gene mutations is missing opportunities to develop truly effective prevention strategies based on a broad understanding of causative factors. We always talk about the cause, the source, and the root. We can't just peg it on the DNA. The important thing now is to understand the environment that you're subjecting yourself to and how that DNA is going to express itself or shut those disease-causing genes down. So you're not the genes that you're born with, it's the genes you express that matter most. So genes can be turned on or you can turn them off. And then it's based on your environment. Pro-cancer genes can be turned on or pro-cancer genes can be turned off. Genes that fight cancer can be turned on and genes that fight cancer can be turned off. So it's your environment and it's your lifestyle that determines what's going to flip the toggle switch on and off for each of those factors. So epigenetics, which goes beyond genetics and has preeminence over your genetics, refers to the fact that lifestyle choices can make changes in gene expression that are superior to the power of the DNA you inherited from your parents or your grandparents. What you do, how you think, the way you behave, and the environment you live in are much more important than your DNA and can turn off bad genes and turn on good ones, or vice versa. So it's not your DNA that's your destiny. It's the genes that load the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger. So the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We always say the genes make up a pattern, but are influenced by everything they encounter in the environment. And that's considering your nervous system, your mental state, your sleep, diet, quality of nutrients, quality of macronutrients, fatty acids, and nutrient levels, activity levels, toxins, and your culture. So when we test, we get an opportunity to correct. So here's a perfect example from a study that was done. They took 30 men with prostate cancer who decided against traditional medicine. They refused chemotherapy, they refused radiation, but instead they changed their lifestyle. Number one, they changed the activity of 500 genes. They increased the activity of 48 disease-preventing genes. They turned off the activity of 453 disease-promoting genes, all involving prostate and breast cancer. So the genetic code is basically one thing, but the epigenetic code is the more important thing, which controls your DNA. And this was written about and published in Time magazine very recently. They said epigenetics tells us that little things in life can have an effect of great magnitude. So you pass on your genes and you also pass on your epigenes or your epigenetics. So it's not just determining how your health and your life are going to be now, but it's also what you're going to transfer on to the next generation. Epigenetics, we know now, will pass down pro-cancer or anti-cancer genes for the next 4 generations. So how you take care of yourself right now will affect your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And that's been scientifically proven. So what about your nervous system? Can that affect your genes and the way your genes are expressed? Well, absolutely. Your brain is the interface between your environment and the genes of every cell in our body. In response to environmental stimuli, your brain adjusts the composition of the body's tissue fluids, which is the equivalent of growth medium or nutrition for our body cells. Electrical signals travel from the central nervous system through the peripheral nervous system to carry out physiological responses requested by the brain. And again, this has been demonstrated over and over how important your nervous system is in terms of its ability to respond to its environment. That's why we do the heart rate variability, because we know that the longer an individual gets adjusted, the longer an individual stays under chiropractic care, the better suited they are to their environment, the better able that you are to handle stress. And because of that, the stress doesn't affect your health as much, doesn't run your immune system down, your risk of cancer goes down, and it affects the way that your DNA is expressed. So this is huge. When we talk about heart disease, the number one disease killer is also the number one most preventable disease. It's been estimated that approximately 200,000 lives could be saved if certain heart risk environmental factors were addressed, even modestly. They took 2,000 people for this study, and they recruited them for smoking, alcohol, diet, exercise, and managing stress. And when they applied all those things, they dramatically lowered the risk of heart disease. And the more of the lifestyle essentials that they addressed, the lower the chance of the disease. If you changed one lifestyle factor, you lowered your disease risk by 6%. If you did all 5 lifestyle factors, you lowered your risk by 60%, which is 10x, 10 times lowering your risk of heart disease. If you did every lifestyle factor, if you employed all these things, not smoking out in eliminating alcohol, diet, exercise, and managing stress. So the number one disease killer is also the number one most preventable disease. So it's one thing to test for your DNA, but it's another thing to apply the correction. And breast cancer is a leading cause of disease that kills more women, probably. I would say 1 out of 3. We know that 1 out of 3, it's closer to 1 out of 2 women now die from cancer every single year. And breast cancer is one of the leading causes, disease-killing causes of cancer. A 2006 study found that in the United Kingdom, they found that obese women had 60% increased risk of developing breast cancer compared to women with normal weight. So that's significantly important. Cancer is a perversion of genetics. They've talked about a genome that becomes pathologically obsessed with replicating itself. So if we can identify the genes and overcome them by changing the environment, then we can get a leg up on this. So after the test, how do we make these changes? When we talk about upgrading genes, here are some examples. So an example of a diet that damages genes, particularly cancer genes, too many carbs, too much sugar, commercial protein, not enough protein, bad fats, not enough healthy fat. These are all examples. A shortage of nutrients that your genes need to work properly, such as B vitamins, vitamin C, and zinc. And these factors will, again, either turn on cancer-promoting genes or turn them off, as an example. Another example of upgrading your genes, looking at toxins, again, which is going to affect the expression of the DNA. How many medications is an individual on? Is there heavy metals, lead and mercury we talked about, and where they come from in our last video message. Processed foods, electromagnetic frequencies from our phones, TVs, tap water, lead in the water, plastic bottles, indoor and outdoor air pollution, pesticides, herbicides. We talked about glyphosate in the last video message, how damaging that is to your brain and to your DNA. Household products like sprays, cleaners, soaps, shampoos, toothpastes, sunscreens, the list goes on, not to mention smoking and alcohol. So how can we apply these factors and make these improvements that we call upgrading our genes? Number one, correct subluxations. Another one would be managing inflammation and oxidation, applying physical activity if you have a sedentary lifestyle, or looking at an individual who's overtraining or overstressed, lack of sleep, stress, anxiety. These are all things that affect our genes for better or worse. So in looking at this very specifically, to eliminate the guesswork, we do DNA testing. And when we look at the results, the lab that we use, a certified lab, extracts the DNA from your cells. We get that from your saliva. And the lab processes the DNA on a genotyping chip that reads hundreds of thousands of variants in your genome. The genetic data is analyzed, and we generate a personalized report based on well-established scientific and medical research. And finally, we review with you exactly what you can do to epigenetically improve your health and decrease your risk of genetic disease risk profile. So let me give you an example of that. I'm going to share another screen. I'll give you a nice example of what this actually looks like. So I'm going to share with you a DNA report and what that actually looks like. So hang with me 1 second. And okay, so hopefully you can see that right now. And basically this is a portion of the gene reporting tool that we use, Gene Explanations. So it's going to have lifestyle items on here and also health risk items. So these particular genes address, here's a gene ADRB2. Not that you really need to know what that means, but it shows that subjects with these genotypes are less able to mobilize fat stores for energy and have been shown to have a greater risk of obesity and elevated insulin levels when carbohydrate intake is greater than 49%. So with this particular individual who has, you could see all three of these genotypes lit up, high risk for obesity and elevated insulin levels. So what does this person want to do? Decrease intake of carbohydrates. So at least keeping the carbs, the daily carbs, under 49%, helps you very specifically manage your weight. Here's another gene, TAS1R2. This one is known for regulating metabolic and energy homeostasis, also specifically affecting the gastrointestinal tract, pancreas, and hypothalamus. For this individual, it would be important to decrease the intake of high carbohydrate containing foods, especially high sugar foods. Here's another one, ADRB2, which talks about mobilization of fat. So for this particular individual, high risk for the body's challenge with mobilizing fat. These carriers are less able to mobilize fat stores in response to exercise. So for these individuals, it's important to emphasize the use of diet for weight management. So if this particular person was trying to exercise the heck out of himself, trying to lose weight, based on this gene, that is spitting in the wind, so to speak. So if this person wants to lose weight with this type of gene, they really want to look at diet and use exercise in a different way, a different fashion. So for this particular gene, APOA5, it's important to monitor saturated fat intake. Why is that? Because this allele has been associated with greater weight loss and less weight loss, especially when on a high saturated fat diet. And so for this particular individual, if they're on a keto diet, that is not going to work well for them. Their triglycerides are going to go up. They're not going to lose fat. They're going to be severely challenged in that case. Here's the FTO gene. What is that? Fat mass and obesity associated gene. So for this particular gene, if there's a high risk variant here, you want to modify the diet to include a moderate amount of carbohydrate, increase monounsaturated fatty acid, and decrease saturated fats, and manage the total fat intake. Regular physical activity is recommended. So this is interesting because, again, people struggle with what kind of diet should I have? Should I have a Mediterranean diet? Should I do the keto diet? Should I be on the paleo diet? Well, as you could see, based on the genes, one size does not fit all. So if this particular individual would go on a keto diet and they'd have lots of saturated fats, you will see that based on these genes, that's not going to work very well for that person. So based on this genetic report, the DNA report, it is specifically recommended for this particular person to have more of a Mediterranean diet with increased monounsaturated fatty acids, lots of extra virgin olive oil, reduce the amount of carbohydrates. There it is right there. That's why I always say, you don't guess, you test. This eliminates the guesswork for us. So, these are all lifestyle changes that were recommended. And then we go on to the health report, some other things that show you bone health, detoxification. Here's an important one. So detoxification genes, this one, CYP1A1, shows how your body deals with toxins and how it's going to respond and react to that with a high risk genetic profile. For this particular individual, it is indicated that it's important to reduce exposure to all diet and environmental pro-carcinogens such as PAH, aromatic amines, nitrates, and smoking of any kind. In addition, attention should be paid to optimizing phase 2 detoxification. That's why very often in our detox workshop, I recommend the complete clean shake, because that's what it does. It boosts phase 2 liver detoxification and would be a good support for an individual who has this type of gene risk profile. Another gene would be GSTM1. So for this particular individual, has three. You can see three of these hearts are lit up there, which means super high risk profile for this genetic expression. Diet rich in antioxidants to minimize exposure to toxins, substantially increase the intake of cruciferous and allium vegetables to increase the risk of other GST enzymes. Why? Because this is showing that the gene is deleted and this person has a severely limited ability to detox, phase 2 liver detox. This person shows that they're gonna have a tough time doing that, and they're gonna need all the help that they can get. Now, again, if you didn't have this DNA report, how would you know? Well, we know it's important to have blueberries and strawberries and antioxidants and all these other things to eliminate free radicals and decrease your risk of cancer. But look how much more specific this is and how much more important this is to answer the question of why don't you feel well? Why do you have brain fog all the time? Why are you tired all the time? Why do you have headaches? Why do you not feel well? Well, maybe it's because your body can't detox. Maybe genetically, you're predisposed to an inability for your body to be able to handle that at the capacity that it's supposed to. And you wouldn't necessarily know it unless a DNA report literally basically just reads your mail and tells you, oh, all along you knew this, because you live your life and you try different things and you look back on these years and you're like, man, I remember I felt so much better when I did this, when I used to exercise, or I used to eat that. And then you read the DNA report and you're like, oh, no wonder. That's exactly what I used to do when I was at my best. So that's what I love about this. And I experienced that for myself as well. Here's an individual who has the MCM6 lactose intolerance gene. And there it is right there. 3 hearts telling you the highest risk profile. Avoid intake of dairy products. Here's the MYRF FADS1 gene, showing systemic inflammation, inflammatory disorders, high risk for that. So this would be a good indication to make sure that you're getting lots of turmeric, the ultraplex curcumin, that you make sure that you're fully supported every day, that you're taking that type of supplement to manage inflammation, because that type of individual is going to be at a much higher risk for that. So more inflammation markers and heart disease, fat metabolism, methylation, which is your body's ability to detox. Very, very comprehensive report. I just wanted to give you some just some excerpts there so that you could see what a report looks like and how to make it practical. Once you read the report and you see, where the genetic strengths are and where the weaknesses are, then you can address them. I always say that supplements are important. Supplements and nutrition is important, but it's never a one size fits all. You can take supplements and you can focus on nutritionally in a generic fashion, in a general fashion, or you could do it at a much more specific level and intensification, as we have focused on in these last several video messages. So the testing really brings it down to a microscopic level to show you exactly what you can do to take your health to the next level. And hopefully what I've shared with you today has been an encouragement. I trust that it's been interesting for you. I know it was eye-opening for me when I did my own DNA testing. And I circled back and I said, this makes 100% sense, because when I was at my best, when I had my best energy, when I felt my best, when my digestion was best, when I woke up consistently every day with good energy, when my weight was able to be most manageable with the least amount of effort, I look back at my DNA testing and I was doing all the things that my DNA testing confirmed recently that I should be doing now. So there it is. There you have it. I just wanted to share that with you today. And again, as I said, hopefully that was it made sense. And I'm glad that I'm able to have the opportunity to share this with you. If there's anything that we could do to help you get more information or better help you in any way, shape, or form, utilize this information, ask me in the adjusting room, stop at the front desk, ask Deborah about the DNA test, what it all entails, how to make an appointment. And as I always say, information is one thing, but information without application is hallucination. And I say that with tongue in cheek, but the truth is that you have to act on things in order to see change. And that's what we're here for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love and appreciate you. God bless.